So I was talking to a client recently, and the thing that came up with permission, by the way, we don't talk
Mhm.
about things with clients without permission. And just to be clear here, that's important to say. But the thing that came up was the burnout and overwhelm that was coming up for her and how that was impacting her ability to care for herself and to even do any form of self-care. So with dealing with caring for the household, the kids, the responsibilities just that are life, the concern that she wasn't caring for herself as an individual and was just completely neglecting self-care. And so I wanted to address that because it's not a thing that she's alone in. I know this is a thing that I've experienced. Rita, you've talked about experiencing this. It's a thing that's plastered all over the place, right?
Right.
Um, Specifically regarding the self-care piece of this, right? Because the overwhelm, burnout, those are all things that we have to attend to. And as a matter of fact, the self-care is actually the thing that's going to keep us from getting to that place of overwhelm and burnout. So not finding a space for it is just perpetuating that issue. And so the I wanted to talk about how we can make sure that that self-care doesn't get put on the back burner. And so the first thing I want to mention is just being really, really clear on what the definition of self-care is. Because we've talked about this before, but just for anybody who's new to this conversation with us, self-care is when I talk about self-care, we talk about the whole self, right? Deep
Mhm.
self-care, not just taking a walk by all means, not just that, not just the physical stuff, not just eating a salad for lunch or, whatever. Um, Making absolutely sure that you're attending to all of the areas of your needs. So you have four, you'll hear about like a lot of areas. I condense them into four areas. I think everything
Okay.
basically falls into four areas. So you get your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual.
Hmm.
And so it's making absolutely sure that all four of those areas are attended to. So it's about being really aware of what you're allowing in your space as far as like mental and emotional are going, right? So if you've got
Yeah.
like, I like to talk about the news because the news is a trigger for me. I don't watch the
Mm.
news.
I don't either.
I don't, every once in a great while, I'll put it on for situational awareness. But for the
Mhm.
most part, that it doesn't play in my space. For me, that is emotional and mental self-care because it's exhausting, it's draining, it's sad, it's
Mm.
terrifying what's
So
going.
negative. Yeah.
Yes. So, is situational awareness important? Sure, of course. Do we have to like immerse ourselves in all the negativity? Absolutely not.
Right.
So, and it goes beyond the news, right? Social media, the people that we allow into our circle, the people that we invite into our circle. Are we inviting people who uplift us and make us feel good? Or are we inviting people who like to have somebody to commiserate with, right? There's a time
Yeah.
and a place for everything, but the people, the folks that you're sharing your energy and your space with, if they're not predominantly uplifting you, encouraging you, celebrating you, cheering for you, and you're doing the same for them, then that is perpetuating a neglect on the self-care, the emotional and the mental self-care. And so I think the most important thing, like, and that is just to say that your idea of self-care may or may not include the whole picture of what self-care needs to be in order for you
Mm.
truly to be like re-energizing and refilling your cup. If you're not attending to all of those spaces, you may be missing a thing. And that's potentially, even if you are doing what you think is self-care, that's maybe potentially why it's not impacting you as positively as you feel it could be, or as it
Yeah.
really could be. Now, how do we make time for self-care, right? Now we understand what it is. Great. How do I make that happen?
Mhm.
Ugh. So it's about prioritizing it.
Mhm.
And I always go back to, do you feel you deserve it? Because I think a
Oh.
lot of it starts with, do we even think we deserve it, right? Because we get into this headspace of, I don't deserve to be relaxing, recharging when there are things to be done around the house, when my kids, need something from me, when my spouse needs me to do, when I need to run errands for the household, right? What right do I have to take time for me when all these other things need to be done? So, do you think that you're deserving of it? And a lot of times the answer that I'm seeing is no, even
Wow.
if not put in those words, right? It's all of the actions that you're
Yeah.
displaying that tell me the answer to that is no. You don't
Mm.
think that you're deserving. And so we really do need to get to the core of why you're not deserving, but more importantly, why how you get to a place where you do feel deserving, right?
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of angles there, and it's different things are going to resonate with different women. So some of the places that, because we are so focused on how we're showing up for others, right? As a generalization, we are so focused on how we can show up for our kids and for our spouse and for whomever else is in our circle, right? And if that's the perspective of where we need to start with why it's so important that you have self-care, then we can start there. And the thing that I have to say on that is you can't show up for them when you're exhausted and you're burned out as your best self. If what you truly want is to be your best self for them, you can't do that. Not when
Mhm.
you're long-term burnt out. At
Yeah.
some point, it's just going to stop. There is going to be exhaustion, resentment. You start to resent having to show up for people when you don't have the energy to do it. And I know that if we're showing up for folks, that's not why. We're not doing it out of obligation. We're doing it out of the kindness of our hearts. But at
Mhm.
some point, it does become an obligation and just a weight if we're not
Right.
also refilling our own cup. So if
Mhm.
what you're looking at is you want to be able to show up for the people that you love or the people who depend on you, you have to fill your own cup. You're not going to be able to show up for them forever without attending to you.
Yeah.
That, and let's see, what was the other place I was going with? Oh, just that let's say that we're not looking at how we're showing up for other people. We really are just looking at you as an individual because you don't have to be your best self for other people. You get to be
Yeah.
your best self for you. So maybe you're in that place now, right? Where you're like, it's not about how you're showing up for others. It truly is about how you're showing up for you. In which case, the approach is a little bit different, but it still comes back to what is the block? What is keeping you from doing that? There's something still that's there, some kind of a belief system that has you stuck, where you don't quite believe that you get to do that yet. And so we've got to
Mhm.
uncover that belief system so that you can move past it.
Do you think it's like a feeling of they don't deserve it, maybe?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes in the word deserve might not feel like it fits. So it might, do you deserve it? Do you feel
Or
like
do you don't
are
need it,
enough?
maybe?
Like you do enough? Like,
Yeah.
there's different words that might fit in that space, but it comes back to like why don't you think that you get to have it? So deservedness, enoughness, those are big words that come up frequently around that.
Yeah, no, I was saying deserve in relation to I think that sometimes if your confidence has been affected
Mm.
by all of these things, then in your mind, you might not feel that you deserve it because your confidence in your self-worth may be damaged
Yeah.
a little bit. And so that might feel like I think like that's super heavy to
Hmm.
feel. But I do think that sometimes when you're in that space, that's maybe what you're thinking, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that in that case, not in that case, but in any case, it's a lot of this isn't just about, it is about the deservedness, right? And it is about thinking that we haven't done enough. We got to do a little bit more. And that's a story. That's not true.
Mhm.
You've done enough, right? But why
Right.
why don't you think that you do? A lot of this is going to come back to conditioning, right? What
Hmm.
did you see growing up?
That's true.
And some of this stuff is going to come into our adult lives, right? It's going to come from our adult lives, but so
Hmm.
much of who we are and our way of being, the way that we do things, is because of conditioning from
Yeah.
early childhood. So it's how were you told to act, or what did
Mhm.
you witness from the people who you were observing? How were they acting, right? If they were go, 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 it just makes sense, right? That's what I know. That's what I know to be true. That's what I witnessed. And it's we
Oh,
don't stop and question it is the problem. Why? Why is it that way? Is there another way for it to be? We're not conditioned
yeah.
to ask the question. We're conditioned to do the thing.
I was going to say, I think that sometimes you can also change those things, like your feeling of what you need to achieve and do can also be based on your peer group. So if you see other moms, in this case, other military spouses who are what may be perceived as performing at a high level, like doing it all, juggling all the things, doing all the things, and then you're trying to keep up with her or comparing yourself to her, then
Yeah.
I think that that would definitely be a factor as well, because now you're trying to do maybe all these extra things that nobody wants you to do. You're just doing it based on what you see Sally over here doing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I call comparisonitis, right? I mean, not just me.
Right,
A lot of people say that, but looking around and what are they doing and, comparing yourself to that or what you perceive is the more
right.
accurate, what you perceive them to be doing, where you perceive that they are at, how you perceive that they are living their life. Because your perception is not their reality. I can guarantee you that.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so I do actually put comparisonitis or not comparing under self-care. It is
Yeah.
not comparing yourself to others is a form of mental and emotional self-care. Um, you have no idea what is going on. I've actually had people like, Heather, how do you do it all? I have had this a lot.
Hmm.
And early on, it was because I was pretending. Like,
Yeah.
if you would have asked me, people did ask me this, 5, 10 years ago, because I was a perfectionist. I was stuck in a cycle of trying to make everything seem perfect because that was my fear pattern. That was how I
Hmm.
survived. That was how I kept from being judged and ridiculed and all of the things. Well, if it's perfect, what are they going to judge? Right. And so my mask was one of perfectionism. So you asked me how I did it all. Um, by the skin of my teeth and screaming inside
Right.
the
Right.
whole time that it wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough. I sucked at it. Like my inner critic was mean. So my
Hmm.
smile told you, yeah, I've got it all together. My inner critic, had she been allowed to say something in front of you, it wouldn't have sounded nice. Like it would have been
Right.
the truth behind the smile, right?
Mhm.
Now, today, if you ask me how I do all the things, how I keep it all together, I will tell you a good portion of the time I do because I have allowed myself to not look at my friend or my neighbor or my whomever and compare myself to her. When I catch myself in a space of doing that, I stop myself,
Right.
right?
I think it's more prevalent now with social media too. It just makes it more, I guess, easy to compare yourself to others and
Yeah.
to let that allow you to not maybe to take on more stuff than you necessarily have to because so and so said that this is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Um, compared to, like, let's say somebody shares their morning routine and this is someone
Mhm.
you've been admiring this whole time,
Mhm.
and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning too. I need to, do this. I need to do that
Yeah.
because that's what she does. And she looks amazing. She has all of her things together, or so it seems. And so I think that where social media is a problem is something, it is this case where you are looking at other people and comparing yourself and then getting in your own head and self-talking in
Mhm.
a negative way
Yeah.
and not doing the things, right? Like you might
Right.
start out doing it and then all of a sudden you fall off and then you feel
Yeah.
like a failure
Mhm.
because you're no longer able to do the things.
Yeah.
So if you had a tip for someone who just start out with one tiny thing that they could start doing, what would it be?
For self-care,
Yeah.
I would say some practice that resonates with you around
Mhm.
self-love.
Yeah.
Because if we don't
Yeah.
think we're deserving, we're not loving ourselves. We don't have that level of self-love to give ourselves all of the things. So a self-love, okay, I'm going to lose some people here. I know it, but please rock with me, okay? Mirror work was where I started with the self-love. I know people hate it. I know it brings some people to tears. And I will tell you, those tears are okay. They are an elimination of energy that you don't want living in your body. You've
Yeah,
got
but
to
it can
get that
be,
energy out.
that can take a lot of emotional energy from
It
you.
can. So I would not say, look in the mirror and say, you're a goddess. I love you. You're amazing. Don't do that. Start where you are. There's something
Right,
about you, surely, that you can look at and appreciate. Maybe it's a physical feature. Maybe it's a way of being. Maybe it's the way you show up for others. Maybe it's the way you conquered something the other day that you didn't think you could conquer, right? Start where you are. I'm not saying take the leap and, fall in love with yourself immediately and look at yourself like you're the most, impressive person on earth. If that's not truly how you feel
well,
about yourself, that's BS. In
did
your
you see or have you read the Mel Robbins thing where she just basically is like, you give yourself a high five in the mornings?
It's exactly one of the things I incorporated into so I started with
But I feel like that's easy. You don't have to tell yourself anything. Just like,
you absolutely don't
yeah,
have to tell yourself anything if that's where you're at. I think every person has to gauge what they're ready for. If you're not
right,
ready, I say look yourself in the eye and smile. If you can't do that, what can you do? Is it the high
right,
five? Do the high five.
right,
If it's
right.
not words of affirmation, but you can maybe muster a smile for yourself, do that. If you can add a word of affirmation that actually does feel good to you, it doesn't make you want to go, oh, I can't believe I just said that. That doesn't feel right, right? We don't want that. If you can muster words of affirmation, something you can find that you do appreciate yourself, start there. You've got to start where you are. But I'll go back to if I had some advice on what somebody could do right now today, do a little bit of mirror work. Give yourself permission to start where you are and to push the boundary a little bit further each time so you can see that progress.
I was going to say one of the most beneficial things for me that was the least intrusive
Mm.
thing that I ever had to do, or that I was taught to do, was affirmations. And basically, though, they were just on my wall in front of my desk, but you could also put some good ones on your mirror. And then what happened is I wasn't making an effort to go and read them, but I just would see them out the
Mm.
corner of my eye, and then I would read it, and then I would start to
Yeah.
believe it, and I would start to feel it. And I think that that's maybe something easy for someone to do that doesn't take very much effort. In addition to like you said, put it on the mirror, put one or two on the mirror, and what's going to happen is every time you walk in that room, you're going to just subconsciously read it, and then you're going to start believing it
Yeah.
and feeling it. And I feel like that was because at the time they didn't like there was no talk of mirror work. That wasn't a thing. I actually never heard of it until Mo Robbins had that book. And then that's when I realized that I didn't know that that was something that you suggested either until just now.
Yeah, this is actually something that we were required to do in coaching when I was
Love it.
becoming certified as a coach. This was part of the work that we did on ourselves. And I will tell
And so
you,
you were
people
able to
started at
suspend.
all different places. Some people came back and they're like, I cried. Some people came back and they're like, I couldn't look myself in the eye. And some
Mm,
people came back and were like, I looked myself in the eye and it was so freaking weird.
yeah.
Everybody started somewhere different. So you've got to give yourself permission to start where you are.
Wherever you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, that you have done it yourself and, you see the benefit in it. I could say, um, for me, it would be a little bit too much, you know?
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
appreciate and I
would,
so appreciate your honesty, Rita, because the thing is, it is going to be for some people, right? And they need to hear that they're not alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I would be too critical on myself. I would be one of those who would be like, "Ew," and am like that to me.
Hmm.
Right. I'm not like that with other people. Other people, I'm like, oh my God, she's so gorgeous. She's so sweet. She's so this, she's so that. I am just so critical on myself. And like when you talked about the perfectionism and stuff like that, I think, and this is my experience, a lot of women, especially ones that I have worked with, have all started with the perfectionism being an issue,
Hmm.
control being an issue, and fear being an issue. Those are the three things that I see a lot of female entrepreneurs and business owners struggle with the most.
Yeah.
And so I think, though, doing the self care, like what I've said 1,000 times, like you're not going to be able to be successful in this if you're not doing the self care or the self work to like work through some of these feelings, like mastering perfectionism, like just putting it out there,
Yeah.
messy.
Yeah.
Messy as hell, and just saying, you know what, it is what it is. I can't control everything, but I feel like you work your way up to that. A lot of people, they're not able to do that straight away.
No, absolutely. I don't, nobody starts at the end, right?
Right,
Nobody
right.
starts at, in the middle even. We all start
Yeah,
at the beginning. But everybody's beginning is different too.
yeah,
And so that's
that's true.
why there's so even when I do group coaching, you still have to coach the individual because
Yeah,
even though we're all on the general, journey together, there's a lot of places that it intersects. We are still very different in where we're coming from because of our backgrounds and our own stories and, our own
yeah,
life experiences that put us to wherever it is we are today.
yeah.
But yeah, and I'm assuming that something I've said is there for everybody.
Mhm.
But in the case that it's not, in the case that you're like, I can't even do that, I don't want you to feel shame. I want you to reach out for support because there is no shame in where you're starting.
Right.
You wanting to get started is worth celebrating.
Well, and we've talked about this before, but I agree wholeheartedly. I wouldn't have done the affirmations. I wouldn't have done the journaling. I wouldn't have done the things without the support of a, loving coach who was gentle but very firm.
Mhm.
And that's the type of coach that I enjoy because, it was beneficial to me. But without that, I don't think I would have ever just, thought or saw a podcast or something and been like, you know what, I'm going to put affirmations on my wall or anything like that because I didn't feel like I needed it. I didn't realize that it was something that I needed.
Mhm.
So do you feel like some of your clients may feel like that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I would say on that note that I think that not everybody fully understands how affirmations work. I don't have a better way of saying that right now. A lot of people try affirmations and like, I've done it, it doesn't work. There's
Right.
probably a reason that we can pinpoint that it doesn't work. And
Mhm.
so, yes, is the answer I'm giving you to your question. And just because even if you have tried it, that it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that it can't. It's just that maybe it needs some tweaking. Um,
Well, I'll give you an example of that. For instance, one of my affirmations was, I am successful, right? And
mhm.
my coach told me immediately, take that down and replace it with something else. And I was like, that's weird. And she said the reason why is because everybody's definition of success is different. And although you might put this, maybe there's a barometer for you for success, but you're also limiting yourself when you have that association with it. And I love that. And I immediately took it down. And now I don't say I'm successful, right? Because who defines success? And, and nobody is really going to define it for you except for you.
Mhm.
And so I just replaced it with something that was, I guess, more tangible, more
Yeah.
reasonable. And I think that that helped me because I think if you're putting out these broad affirmations,
Yeah.
then and they're not specific, and mine were just words. They weren't like, some of the other ones that I've done have been really long affirmations where you're
Yeah.
really calling into what you want, right? It's
Mhm.
just really detailed. By the end of the year, I'm going to go on this vacation that
Yeah. So we're talking about
it,
manifest, like
yeah,
affirmations for manifesting.
right.
Yeah.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about just words that were
Mhm.
on my wall. I am this, I am that, I am this. And yeah, so I think that if your words are very broad and could have different meanings to them,
Mhm.
maybe that's not the right words to use for your affirmations.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And on that note, I will say, I think I think there's a little bit of a difference between affirmations for self-love and affirmations for manifesting.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some, crossover, but I think that there's kind of a bit of a different approach there. From the perspective of like self-care affirmations, what I would say is pick something, not just a broad thing that, like you said, not just any old broad statement. Pick something that feels accurate, like that feels appropriate for you, that you do believe, and find the evidence for that thing.
Right.
So I'll just, because you said it, people can love it or hate it, doesn't matter, but I am successful, right? Let's just assume we're going to use that one. I am successful. So if that were something that you did want to use, or I am funny, or any I am statement, right?
Yeah.
What is the evidence? And you do this when you're in a space of, in a not in a negative space, let's put it that way. The words are evading me right now, but when you are in a space where you can accept yourself, right? This is when you write these out,
Yeah.
because when you have the evidence, you have the proof for yourself, then when you're reading that affirmation in a time when you don't like yourself very much, where you're having a tough time, you're not searching for the evidence. It's already there. You've already given yourself that gift of,
Right.
okay, like there's the proof. You can't deny that, because that is your
Right.
fact. And then the other last thing that I would say on that is feel it.
Hmm.
Like, what does it feel like when you say that to yourself and when you allow it? Where does that live in your body? What sensation does that give you? Allow that to exist. And that is where you start to see the benefits of affirmations.
No, I think that that's great. And I'll just go in just a little bit deeper with
Yeah.
that, because let's say, for instance, one of my affirmations is I'm a millionaire, right?
Mm.
My brain is like, no, the fuck you're not.
You're not.
Okay. So it's constantly contradicting what what I'm reading. And then automatically I'm turning it into a, I'm not believing it.
Hmm.
And so I think that, like, what you're saying is like find the evidence. I think that that's a good example of finding the evidence, because if your brain is trying to associate it with something and it's not able to kind of clarify that, then it's not going to be even a worthwhile affirmation, right? Because your brain is constantly telling you, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not. You're a thousandaire, okay? Like, your brain is like, you're not a millionaire, even though maybe one day you will be. But I think that it can be counterproductive to have affirmations like that, where it's really such a contradictory statement to where you are in
Yeah.
life,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah, I agree.